What's up everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mike Verspril, and today's video we're going to be blending this foreground right here of a lighthouse with a tracked image of the Milky Way. Now, one of the hardest things when blending a Milky Way that's tracked with a foreground that has a lighthouse is recreating these light rays that are coming off the lighthouse. Now, I'm going to be using Luminar 2018, and in that program has a filter called sunrays. Now, a lot of people use this for sunsets and sunrises, but we're actually going to be using that to help recreate the light rays that are coming off the lighthouse. So I'll show you guys how I'm going to do that, and also show you guys how I'm going to replace this sky right here with this one. So without further ado, let's jump on into this. Alright, so we're going to hit open image and select our lighthouse JPEG. Now I'm using JPEGs just to kind of help with video recording and not bog down my computer, but typically you want to use raw files, TIFF files, or something with a little bit more control. And we're also going to hit this plus button right here and do add new image layer and select our sky. And what I want to do is duplicate this layer right here of my foreground. I'm going to bring that to the top. Now we have to reposition our sky. It's a little bit low. We could lower the opacity of the foreground. Now it'll kind of help us see what we're doing. Click on your sky layer and go to Tools, Free Transform, and I'm just going to bring this up. And you don't want the horizon of your tracked image to go past the horizon of your foreground. I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit right there, hit done, and if I click on my foreground with the lower opacity, I can see that I am below the horizon of the foreground, and the Milky Way is in a pretty good spot. So we can bring the opacity back up to 100, and we're going to clear the workspace right here and go to Add Filter, Black and White Conversion, and we want the Curves filter. And basically what we're going to do is create a luminosity mask, and that's going to help us get rid of this sky and mask out the foreground. So to do that, we're going to lower the red, yellow, and green, and we're going to bring up the cyan and the blue, since our sky is mostly has a bluish tint to it. So what we're basically trying to do is create a lot of contrast. You want to have a pretty white sky and a black foreground, and that's going to help us create the layer mask. So I'm going to increase my contrast. Now it's going to be a little tricky because we do have a light source coming off the lighthouse, and this area is a very light color. So I am going to have to paint with a brush and fine tune the lighthouse when we go to mask this out, but the rest of this foreground should mask quite nicely. So I'm going to increase my highlights, lower the shadows, and we're going to increase the whites. You know what, I'm going to leave the black right where that's at. Now jumping down to the curves, we're going to increase our highlights as well. And if you have to, you could also lower your shadows some more as well. But that's pretty easy to kind of paint and fix. I'm pretty good with the foreground. It's more the sky that's going to be a little trickier. So once you have good contrast between your sky and your foreground, go up to your foreground layer, click this brush, and select luminosity. Now it might not look pretty right here. That's okay. We have to invert our mask. So if you right click the brush, go to mask, invert, and we need to get rid of our filters. So there we have it. It masked out the sky area. As you can see, it's not perfect yet. I do have to fine tune this a little bit because it is tricky working with a lighthouse. But if you didn't have a lighthouse and you still want to use this technique, it is a great way to separate your sky from your foreground. So grabbing my brush tool, I have to fix the sky a little bit more by selecting the erase button, and I could adjust my softness, opacity, and size of the brush right here. And there's also shortcut keys to help you out. But I'm actually going to speed up this part right here because it's probably going to take me about 5 minutes just to kind of fine tune the sky a little bit. Alright, so I just finished fixing up the sky. Now what I have to do is just zoom in around this lighthouse with a hard brush. So I'm going to decrease the softness to 0%, make my opacity at 100%, and really zoom in and kind of fine tune this whole area. So again, I'm just going to speed this process up. Alright, so here is the masked out foreground and my sky. I'm actually going to duplicate each layer. So duplicate. And duplicate the sky as well. And I'm going to put the sky underneath my masked out foreground. I'm going to turn off these other guys. Alright, so clicking on the top layer, I'm going to rasterize this layer. Now, before I do that, let me hit undo. I'm going to show you guys what happens if you don't rasterize the layer. Alright, so we're going to select the sunray filter and click where it says place sun center, and that will allow us to move this around freely. Now you're probably thinking that looks really weird, and that's because we didn't rasterize this layer. So that's why I want you guys to make a copy of it, because if you plan on making changes or tweaking some things, you always have those copies to fall back on. Because once I rasterize this layer, that's going to basically be a permanent change. So that's why I always like to work from a copy. So I'm actually going to hit undo and rasterize this layer. Now that our layer is rasterized, if we go to hit sunray filter, place sun center, you can see it's going across the whole image, not just the foreground part. Now clearly this is overdone. We're gonna have to dial this back. So I'm gonna lower the penetration to around 10 and bring down the amount, bring down the look, the number of rays. Actually, you know, we'll keep that around 30. We're gonna decrease the length of these rays. So basically you want to look at the lighthouse you photographed at night and look how the rays are kind of oriented and try and mimic that as best as possible. So I'm gonna keep on playing around with these settings a little bit. Randomize this. Now if there's some rays that you don't want in your image, maybe these rays going down this way, I don't want them. I just want the rays that are going left and right and a couple above. There's a brush tool on the sunray filter. You could select that. It's going to create a mask. Alright, so it created a mask and we just have to invert it. And then what we want to do is erase away some of the rays that we don't want. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Running a video while trying to use software like this is starting to kind of really lag, so I'm going to end it right here. But I just wanted to give you guys an idea on how to use Luminar 2018 to mask out your night sky with a luminosity mask. And I also want to show you guys how effective the sunray tool is when not only creating sun rays for sunsets and sunrises, but it can be used to mimic lighthouse rays, which is really amazing. You could definitely play around with this a little bit more, but you have a general idea of exactly what it could do and how realistic it can look. So this has really helped me when I'm dealing with a tracked Milky Way sky and blending it with lighthouses, which is very challenging. So hopefully this helps you guys out like it has done for me. And please check out my merch. I'm going to be working on that more throughout the winter months, but definitely keep that on your radar, and hopefully I'll have another video out next week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.